Trust me, the North Pacific is a place you don't want to be. It's freezing cold and it throws up storms for fun. But you know what's funny? Salmon seem to love the place. In fact, they swim extremely long distances to get there. Now, you won't be wrong if you called a salmon trip to the North Pacific the worst vacation ever. But the real head-scratcher is trying to understand why salmon keep choosing this icy graveyard over warmer, cozier options. To get to the bottom of this, let's first paint a clearer picture of what the North Pacific really is. To put it plainly, the North Pacific Ocean feels like nature arguing with itself loudly. It covers over 63 million square miles, which equals about 163 million square kilometers. And because of that size, weather systems are more aggressive than an underfed pit bull. In winter, surface temperatures sink to 28 degrees Fahrenheit, which equals -2 degrees Celsius. So the water stays liquid, even though it's trying very hard not to. At the same time, storms keep marching through without taking breaks. Would you believe that the waves in the North Pacific Ocean rise past 60 feet? That's about 18 meters. And yes, for a wave that tall, you can call it a moving liquid wall. But that's not all there is to this freakishly unpleasant region, because the winds howl nonstop and shove water in every direction. As a result, nothing here feels stable or friendly. Now imagine being a salmon inside all this chaos. Why would they want to be in such a place? Well, the answer might shock you. Salmon aren't humans like us. So while extremely cold water will turn your lungs into an ice pack, the same cold water helps salmon breathe by holding in more oxygen. And because of that, salmon can survive longer swims here. I'll explain how that works shortly. But before you start saluting salmon like they're the kings of survival, I have to mention that the cold also slows their muscles and reaction time. This makes it difficult to outswim predators, which also means salmon dinners are common among bigger fish here. Then comes the food situation, which never helps. Plankton blooms depend on currents, seasons, and perfect timing. And when storms mix water layers, food scatters everywhere. As a result, salmon have to swim farther distances just to eat. Sadly, every extra mile burns energy they cannot replace easily, and that sucks. Meanwhile, the ocean floor drops away shockingly fast. The average depth reaches about 13,000 feet, which is about 4,000 meters. That depth traps cold water like a locked freezer, and because sunlight barely penetrates, warming never lasts. So the cold stays almost permanently. But this is where history steps in quietly. Despite all this harshness, salmon still love the North Pacific because their ancestors survived here way, way back in the day. And over time, evolution stamped this brutal ocean as their ancestral home. There was no backup location included in the deal, and salmon never received any relocation paperwork. Now I promised I was going to explain how icy waters help salmon breathe and exist like it was just another regular Tuesday afternoon. The truth is, salmon bodies operate like machines tuned for cold suffering. Every system inside them prefers icy conditions. And because of this, cold water feels normal to them. Their blood carries oxygen efficiently at low temperatures, and their enzymes only work inside narrow cold limits. As a result, cold water keeps metabolism steady, and energy burns slowly instead of vanishing quickly. But that's not all, because thanks to the shivering cold, salmon fat stores last longer during long migrations. Their muscles resist fatigue like seasoned athletes, and their gills absorb oxygen easily from dense cold water. In other words, cold equals balance for salmon, while warm water feels like torture for them. Unfortunately, at some point in their lives, they have to return to these warm rivers as their ancestors did way back. This phase reminds them that life has a cruel sense of humor, and they're not even mad about it, even though they have every right to be. The reason is simple. Freshwater rivers heat up way faster than oceans, and that's where the nightmare really begins for salmon. Unlike the vast, deep Pacific that keeps its ice-cold poker face, rivers are shallow, exposed, and basically a giant frying pan. Sunlight hits them and just sits there like it owns the place, and suddenly the water is cooking everything inside it. During heat waves, rivers can hit 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which equals about 21 degrees Celsius. That doesn't sound like death, right? But for salmon, it's basically being trapped in a sauna while running a marathon with no water in a heart that's already failing. Warm water holds less oxygen, which is bad news for a fish that literally breathes underwater. Suddenly, their bodies demand more oxygen, while the river stubbornly refuses to give it. They start gasping faster, hearts hammering, and stress levels skyrocketing, all while the water keeps pretending everything is normal. Imagine trying to breathe through a straw while sprinting uphill. That's exactly how salmon feel. Their gills flap like crazy, the heart is pumping like it owes rent, and yet somehow they still have to keep swimming. Some don't make it, collapsing midstream like they just realized they've been tricked into this nightmare. Others make it to their spawning grounds alive, but not really alive. They're so exhausted their reproductive parts might as well be on vacation. Survive, yes, but reproduce? Not today. And just when you think it can't get worse, snowmelt joins the party. Earlier, snowmelt caused by warmer air means rivers run shallower when salmon are supposed to migrate. Less water equals slower flow and more heat exposure, which just piles on the suffering. Shallow rivers heat faster than deep ones, so now salmon are swimming in slow-motion fryers. They have to burn more energy to cover the same distance, basically running a triathlon in a hot tub with no medals at the end. Some rivers get so shallow that they're basically impassable. Salmon scrape along rocks or get stuck in tiny pools. Think of it as a crowded, hot subway where everyone is exhausted and someone keeps turning off the lights. And then there are dams, because of course, humans thought it would be fun to block their path. Salmon end up piling up below dams, trapped in warm, stagnant water like a bad version of rush hour. Oxygen plummets, predators take note, and the crowding spreads parasites faster than a TikTok trend. It gets really grim here, but salmon have no choices. They can't just take a detour or chill out in the shade. Once migration starts, hormones hijack their bodies and shut down flexibility completely. Feeding stops, energy budgets get frozen. You can't pause instinct. You can't negotiate. Salmon follow ancient chemical maps in their brains, and those maps assume rivers are cold, deep, and perfectly timed. Reality has changed, but instinct doesn't read the news. So here they are, blindly swimming straight into traps we've created, or that nature has suddenly made worse. The body says, keep going. The river says, no mercy. And neither side compromises. Every kilometer feels harder than the last, but they obey anyway. This is where the illusion of choice ends. Salmon are not picking death. They are just too loyal to a set of rules written thousands of years ago. Rules that used to work perfectly but now feel like a cruel joke. Timing is another slap in the face. Warm rivers send confusing signals about when to start migrating. Some salmon leave too early and face low, shallow water. Others leave too late and hit peak heat. Either way, survival chances drop. And no, it's not just a little harder, it's a literal game of Russian roulette, but with gills instead of bullets. The result? Whole populations start disappearing, especially in southern rivers where warming hits first. Northern rivers may survive a bit longer, but eventually they're next. Migration, once a reliable cycle, has become a torture path. And here's the kicker. Predators don't even need to try anymore. Warm rivers make the fish weak, stressed, and easy pickings. Mother Nature has outsourced hunting to temperature itself. From the outside, it might look like salmon are stubborn. From the inside, they're just following orders they can't ignore. Stubborn biology meets a rapidly changing environment, and the outcome is certainly not great. Sticking to ancient instincts made sense for thousands of years, but now it's a death march. In the end, rivers deliver the final blow. Not sharks, not whales, not storms, just water that got too hot too fast. Salmon keep swimming because that's literally all they know how to do. They have no plan B, no negotiation skills, and definitely no pause button. That loyalty, which once ensured the survival of their species, now feels like tragic comedy and a perfect example of how evolution can be both brilliant and brutally ironic. But guess what? No matter how much salmon loves exploring the North Pacific Ocean, there's a loud voice in their head screaming at them to always go back home. But not just back to any random river. No, they go back to the exact same river where they were born. This sounds strange, and I know you're asking yourself, how do they find their way back to the exact river where their lives started? After all, they don't have GPS, or do they? Well, the answer is yes and no. Why? Because once they are born, salmon memorizes the smell of the particular river where they came into this world from. It's amazing but true. What's more amazing is that they carry this smell through adulthood. And when that voice in their head says it's time to go back home to bring more young salmon into the world, they find their way back to the very river where they were birthed. That's an insane level of mapping if you ask me, but it's just normal for salmon. However, the journey back is no joke. Like I mentioned before, the heat zaps their energy and every last ounce of strength goes into only one thing: laying eggs and birthing new salmon. Do you know what this means? Well, as long as adult salmon hasn't laid its eggs, it isn't allowed to eat. Not that there's a scarcity of food or anything of the sort, it's just an automatic setting by nature that stops them from eating, so all the energy meant for digestion would be channeled towards laying eggs. This means a group of salmon on their way to deliver sperm and eggs can pass through as many feeding opportunities as possible and just act like they didn't see it. That's how dedicated they are when it comes to breeding new life. Truth be told, though, this process is greatly overwhelming because it takes a serious toll on their bodies. They are exhausted, half dead, and totally worn out. But the mission must be completed at all costs. Yeah, these guys are real die-hard freaks of nature who are determined to ensure that their bloodlines continue. Sadly, they pay the ultimate price for it, because once the eggs and sperm have been delivered, their collapse comes very fast. Did you know that salmon die in the same streams where they were born? Yep, after they've done their parental duties, their bodies sink, break apart, and disappear forever. Talk about returning to your roots like a freaking hero. But this is where the generosity starts, because dead salmon release nutrients into the water. Nitrogen and phosphorus feed plants and algae, and insects show up like it is a buffet. Well, young salmon actually eat those insects and grow stronger, so it's a win-win. Even trees benefit from dead salmon. Roots absorb nutrients from the water and soil, healthier trees create more shade, and that shade keeps streams cooler for future salmon. So one dead salmon feeds an entire neighborhood. Yep, bears, birds, insects, fish, and plants all benefit. And that benefit revolves around salmon dying right where they're supposed to. Take away that death and all members of the ecosystem would be pissed off. Because fewer nutrients mean weaker plants, animals, and insects. And that's not good. So in the life of a salmon, survival is optional, but reproduction is mandatory. These guys are not designed for living long and happy lives. Instead, they are designed for perfect timing and sacrifice. Mess with that timing or sacrifice, and chaos follows big time. Now add modern problems into this ancient system. Rivers are now warming faster than salmon can handle, which means decay speeds up before spawning even finishes, and salmon die too early. But that's not where the headache even ends. Newly built dams now slow migration and trap salmon in warm water. This means salmon keep burning energy while waiting with nowhere to go. Remember that I told you warmer temperatures confuse migration cues. This causes some salmon to return too early or too late. And it is at this point that their instinct goes into overdrive. They have to move, but changing rivers would break the entire system. So they keep returning even when conditions kill them. From the outside, it looks stubborn and tragic. But from nature's perspective, it's a system that once worked perfectly until climate change and human infrastructure ruined everything for our dear salmon. The real problem here is the speed at which the world changed, and not necessarily the natural design of salmon. The world changed faster than salmon could adapt, and that's the main issue. So you see, salmon are not choosing death because they are dramatic little beings. Not at all. They are just following instructions that are way older than humans. Those instructions demand loyalty over survival. And right now, that loyalty costs everything. But the real question now is, will salmon ever adapt to the way things are now? Or is it too late for these sea creatures to tune in to the current frequency of the ecosystem? Well, salmon have been around the block before. Really, they have. After the last ice ages, they slowly spread across rivers like tiny pioneers in fins and scales, claiming new territory one generation at a time. They survived glaciers, shifts in ocean currents, and the occasional overly ambitious predator looking for a quick meal. This means that without a doubt, adaptation is in their DNA. It has kept them alive for thousands of years. But the problem is, climate change is moving faster than salmon evolution can keep up. Imagine trying to update Windows 95 on a quantum computer. That's basically what these fish are up against. And it's no easy task. Genetics doesn't work on a deadline. It works on generational time, and that's measured in years, decades, and centuries. And salmon, despite their stamina, are slow adapters in the big picture. Even with the best intentions, the number of generations needed to adjust to higher water temperatures far exceeds the time available. It's like being handed a map to escape a building on fire, but your legs are only a few inches long and can't make significant strides. You're definitely not getting out in time. And here's the funny part. Not all salmon species play by the same calendar. Pink salmon are the overachievers. They show up every 2 years like clockwork and bounce back quickly when conditions cooperate. Chinook salmon, on the other hand, are the long-term planners of the group. Some populations take 5 years, even 6, to complete their life cycle. That means fewer generations, slower genetic shifts, and basically zero flexibility when the river decides to roast them alive in a heat wave. As for pink salmon, they are so chill that they say to themselves, "We'll figure it out later." Meanwhile, humans haven't exactly been helpful. And when I say humans, I'm talking about me, you, and construction companies that erect structures every time someone signs a check. Dams block the routes salmon have followed for millennia. Adults are removed for fisheries before they can spawn, and predators, like the famously picky orcas, suddenly find their favorite meal disappearing. Chinook make up over half of what southern resident orcas eat, so when Chinook numbers drop, whales go hungry. Yep, these majestic ocean giants are now stuck relying on a fish that evolution can't save fast enough. So you see, nature's cruel joke just keeps piling on. Even if we humans try to help, the system is so complicated that solutions often feel like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Let's say we fix one river. That'll be great, but does that mean the problem has been solved? Well, not really. Salmon don't just live in one river. They need multiple rivers across different seasons to maintain populations. Some rivers warm too early, some too late, some get blocked by dams, and some are already overfished. Saving one river is like giving one out of 100 drowning people a lifeline. That's helpful. But is it enough to matter? No, it isn't. The irony is, salmon are not suicidal. They are not literally swimming into death on purpose. They are just stubbornly loyal to a world that no longer exists. Their bodies, instincts, and migration timing still run on a schedule built for cooler centuries. Rivers that flowed differently and oceans that obeyed their rules. In other words, salmon are stuck in the past while the present is aggressively hostile. It's like showing up for work in 1920s fashion and expecting your colleagues to compliment your looks. This loyalty creates a bittersweet beauty. Salmon continue their migrations, fighting through rivers that are too warm, streams too shallow, and currents too unpredictable. Their bodies obey the old instructions without thinking twice. Evolution, which once rewarded this behavior, is now turning it against them. Every leap over a shallow stream or scramble past a dam is both heroic and tragic because survival depends on more than effort. It depends on timing, temperature, and a system that isn't cooperating. The thing about adaptation is that it takes time, and time is something salmon may not have. When water temperatures rise year after year, it's like trying to slowly train a team to run a marathon while the track keeps catching on fire. By the time the population genetically adjusts to the new temperature regime, the rivers may already be too warm, too shallow, or too blocked. In other words, adaptation might arrive too late for most of them. Some populations may still survive in the coldest rivers far north, but that's a tiny fraction of the original range. And as they retreat, the ecosystem suffers too. Predators lose food, cultural traditions linked to salmon collapse, and entire river systems shift. Orcas, bears, eagles, even humans feel it. Adaptation may eventually occur, but not before the system itself is deeply changed. Meanwhile, climate change keeps accelerating. Heat waves arrive earlier, rivers stay warmer longer, and snowmelt timing continues to shift unpredictably. As I mentioned before, salmon has no pause button. They cannot wait for evolution to catch up. They follow the rules embedded in their DNA like clockwork, even when the environment is actively conspiring against them. It's a bit like walking a tightrope over a pit of lava while still insisting your ancestors use this rope successfully, so you must too. Even more, human infrastructure isn't slowing down. More dams, water withdrawals, and unrelenting pollution continue to alter the rivers. Predators like whales and eagles rely on salmon, but the fish are fewer and weaker. It's a cascading effect because one weak link and the chain collapses. Salmon adapt slowly, but the world around them isn't pausing for them to catch up. And that brings us to the truly dark irony. Even if some genetic adaptations occur eventually, it may not be enough to save populations in time. Rivers could stay too warm, dams could remain in place, and humans may still overfish. That loyalty, which once ensured survival, is now a trap. Salmon stick to a schedule that no longer exists, continuing to migrate, spawn, and die along paths their ancestors walked. And it's all because they choose to follow ghostly instructions from a colder, safer world. In short, adaptation may arrive too late, if at all it happens. Salmon are living in a fast-forward world with slow-motion biology. Their instinctual obedience to ancient patterns makes them both remarkably persistent and tragically doomed. They keep moving, generation after generation, following roads that have become death traps, hoping evolution somehow catches up before the rivers claim them entirely. But at the end of the day, salmon are not careless, reckless, or foolish. They are just doing exactly what evolution built them to do. The problem is that the world changed faster than evolution could respond, and now loyalty, which is a trait that once saved them, is flirting dangerously with extinction. And unless rivers cool, dams get removed, or humans figure out a system-wide solution that works across generations and rivers, that loyalty may very well finish them off before adaptation ever has a chance to arrive. So yeah, salmon may have survived ice ages, predators, and shifting oceans before, but this time, the clock is ticking faster than their fins can move, and the finish line keeps retreating. The question is, will evolution ever catch up, or is loyalty to a colder, bygone world the last act of a species that refused to quit, even when the odds were impossibly stacked against them? Time will tell. Subscribe to the channel and we'll see you in the next one.